I never imagined my wedding day would become the battlefield that destroyed my family forever. When my fiance David and I decided to hold our ceremony at Sunset Manor Nursing Home so my beloved grandmother could attend my mother, Patricia called it embarrassing, and my sister Jessica laughed about our poverty wedding. They demanded we cancel everything, threatening to boycott if we went through with it. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened the morning after our beautiful ceremony when they both showed up at my door in complete panic, begging me to save them from the consequences of their cruelty. The phone call that changed everything came on a Tuesday evening while David and I were making dinner plans for the weekend. Dr. Williams' voice carried that careful tone medical professionals use when delivering devastating news to families. "Well, I need to discuss your grandmother's recent test results," he said, and I felt my heart sink into my stomach. The cancer has progressed more rapidly than we anticipated. Given her age and overall health, we're looking at weeks rather than months. I sank onto our kitchen counter stool, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Grandma Rose had been my anchor since childhood, the steady presence who raised me after my parents' messy divorce when I was 8 years old, while my mother Patricia threw herself into her real estate career and my sister Jessica focused on her social climbing. Grandma Rose taught me to bake chocolate chip cookies, helped with homework at her kitchen table, and listened to my teenage heartbreaks without judgment. "Has she been told?" I managed to whisper. She specifically requested that we not discuss the timeline with her. She says she wants to live each day fully without counting them down. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence until David found me. 20 minutes later, tears streaming down my cheeks, he wrapped his strong arms around me and I collapsed into his chest, breathing in his familiar scent of cedar cologne and coffee. "She might not make it to our wedding," I choked out. "We planned it for next spring because we thought we had time." David pulled back to look into my eyes, his own dark brown ones filled with compassion. "Then we move up the timeline. What matters most to you?" "Having her there," I said without hesitation. "She's the only family member who actually cares about my happiness instead of what other people might think." That's when David suggested something that seemed impossible at first, but gradually made perfect sense. What if we brought the wedding to her Sunset Manor has those beautiful common areas? We could make it work. The idea sparked immediate excitement in my chest. Grandma Rose had been living at Sunset Manor for 2 years since her first cancer diagnosis, and I visited twice a week. The facility was warm and welcoming, with large windows overlooking gardens and a community room perfect for small gatherings. The staff would probably help us plan something beautiful, I said, imagining Grandma Rose in her favorite lavender dress, finally getting to see me married to the man who made me laugh every single day. We spent the evening researching logistics, calling the nursing home director, and sketching ideas on napkins. By bedtime, we had the framework for an intimate ceremony in 3 weeks, giving us enough time to arrange everything properly. The next day, I called my mother and sister to share our revised plans during their weekly lunch at Patricia's house. I should have known from their immediate silence that trouble was brewing. "You want to hold your wedding where—" Patricia's voice rose an octave, and I could picture her perfectly manicured hand clutching her wineglass. "At Grandma Rose's nursing home. It's actually quite lovely, and this way she can attend without the stress of traveling." Jessica's laughter erupted through the phone speaker, sharp and mocking. "Morgan, you cannot seriously be considering a wedding at a nursing home. What will people think?" "They'll think we love our grandmother enough to include her in our special day." "They'll think you couldn't afford a real venue," Patricia interjected. "Honey, I understand you want to be thoughtful, but this is your wedding day. It should be elegant and memorable for the right reasons." My jaw clenched as familiar frustration bubbled up. It will be memorable because the people who matter most will be there celebrating with us. "I'm posting about this in my wedding planning group," Jessica announced. "They need to know about venues to avoid." "Don't you dare," I snapped. "Morgan, be reasonable." Patricia's voice took on that manipulative tone I recognized from childhood arguments. Your father would roll over in his grave knowing his daughter got married in a place that smells like disinfectant. The mention of my deceased father hit like a physical blow. Dad would care about Grandma Rose being there, not about impressing people he never liked anyway. We'll discuss this more when you come to your senses, Patricia said coldly. Jessica and I will find you proper alternatives. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. David looked up from his laptop, where he'd been researching florists who delivered to nursing homes. Let me guess, they're not thrilled about our venue choice. They're horrified, I said, feeling suddenly exhausted. But I don't care. Grandma Rose has given me unconditional love my entire life. If Mom and Jessica can't understand that, it's their loss. David closed his laptop and pulled me close again. We're doing this for the right reasons. That's what matters. But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family was about to make our wedding planning much more complicated than it needed to be. The second phone call from Dr. Williams came at 6 in the morning, jolting me awake with news that would make everything even more urgent. Morgan, your grandmother had another episode last night. She's stable now, but we need to accelerate any plans you might have had. 3 days later, I drove to Patricia's pristine suburban home with determination coursing through my veins. Her neighborhood always made me feel inadequate, with its perfectly manicured lawns and houses that looked like they belonged in home design magazines. Patricia's colonial sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, complete with seasonal wreaths and flowering bushes arranged by her landscaping service. Jessica's silver BMW was already parked in the circular driveway when I arrived, which meant they had been planning their intervention strategy without me. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, listening to the elaborate chimes echo through what I knew was an impeccably decorated interior. Patricia opened the door wearing her real estate power outfit, a navy blazer and matching skirt that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves, and her makeup looked professionally applied, even though it was barely 10 in the morning. Morgan, thank goodness you're here. We need to have a serious conversation. She led me through the marble foyer into her formal living room, where Jessica was already seated on the cream-colored sofa with a stack of papers spread across the glass coffee table. My sister looked up with the expression she used to wear when tattling on me as children, equal parts smug satisfaction and fake concern. I've been researching alternative venues, Jessica announced, gesturing toward the papers. Look at these beautiful options that are available on short notice. I glanced at the printouts of country clubs and hotel ballrooms, each more expensive and elaborate than the last. Jessica, we've already made our decision. No, you've made an emotional decision without considering the consequences, Patricia corrected, settling into her matching armchair. I've been fielding phone calls all week from family members asking about wedding details. My stomach dropped. What phone calls? Well, I had to tell Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda that the ceremony has been postponed while we work out venue issues. You told them what? My voice came out sharper than intended. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. We thought it would be easier than explaining the nursing home situation. So you lied to our family about my wedding. We saved you from embarrassment, Patricia said defensively. Can you imagine their reactions if I told them you were getting married in a place where people go to die? The casual cruelty of her words made my hands shake with anger. That place where people go to die is where Grandma Rose lives. It's her home. It's a medical facility, Jessica interjected. Morgan, I showed the photos to my marketing team at work, and they all agreed it would send the wrong message about your priorities. My priority is including my dying grandmother in my wedding day. Patricia's face softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. Sweetheart, I understand your emotional attachment to your grandmother, but you have to think about your future. This wedding will be in photographs that your children will see someday. Do you really want them asking why Mommy got married in a nursing home? I want them to know that their mother values love and family over appearances and status symbols. That's a beautiful sentiment, Jessica said in her most condescending tone, but reality matters too. David's family is well connected in this community. What impression does this venue choice make about his judgment? I stood up abruptly, anger finally overriding my desire to maintain family peace. David's family has been nothing but supportive because they understand what real love looks like. Sit down, Morgan. Patricia's command voice activated the same tone she'd used when Jessica and I were teenagers pushing boundaries. There's something else we need to discuss. Against my better judgment, I perched on the edge of the sofa cushion, ready to bolt if necessary. Jessica pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of negative online reviews for Sunset Manor. I may have posted some concerns about the facility's appropriateness for special events. You posted fake reviews about Grandma Rose's nursing home. I posted legitimate concerns about noise levels and disruption to residents, Jessica said defensively. Those residents would love to celebrate with us. Most of them rarely get visitors. Patricia leaned forward, her expression calculating. Morgan, your father left you his mother's engagement ring specifically so you could have a wedding that honored family traditions. He would be heartbroken to see you throwing away everything he worked to provide. The mention of my great-grandmother's ring, which sat safely in my jewelry box at home, felt like manipulation of the worst kind. Dad would be proud that I'm choosing love over social expectations. Your father was a practical man who understood the importance of making good impressions, Patricia continued. Remember how he always dressed his best for family gatherings and community events. I remember how he volunteered at the soup kitchen every Thanksgiving instead of attending your fancy dinner parties. Jessica and Patricia exchanged glances that confirmed they'd planned this entire conversation in advance. Here's what's going to happen, Patricia announced in her realtor closing voice. You and David are going to select one of these appropriate venues, we'll invite the family properly, and we'll have a wedding that reflects well on everyone involved. And if I refuse, then you'll be planning a wedding without your family's support or attendance, Jessica said coldly. Is your grandmother's presence worth losing everyone else who loves you? The emotional blackmail hung in the air between us, like toxic smoke. I looked at these two women who shared my DNA but seemed incapable of understanding what family actually meant, and felt something break inside my chest. Just then, David's voice called from the foyer. Morgan, your car was unlocked and I wanted to make sure you were okay. We're in the living room, I called back, grateful for his timing. David appeared in the doorway, still wearing his work clothes and looking concerned. He took in the tense atmosphere immediately and moved to stand behind my chair, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. Ladies, he said politely, nodding to Patricia and Jessica. David, perfect timing, Patricia said with fake enthusiasm. We were just discussing venue alternatives for the wedding. Actually, we were discussing emotional manipulation tactics, I corrected. Jessica accidentally knocked over her coffee mug while reaching for another venue printout, sending dark liquid spreading across Patricia's white coffee table and soaking into several of the papers. Oh no! Jessica scrambled for napkins, but the damage was already done. Coffee dripped onto Patricia's cream-colored carpet, and my great-grandmother's ring, which I hadn't realized was sitting on the table, was now sitting in a brown puddle. That's my grandmother's ring. I lunged forward to rescue it, but the delicate band had already absorbed enough coffee to require professional cleaning. This is exactly the kind of chaos that happens when you make emotional decisions, Patricia said, surveying the mess with disgust. David's hand tightened on my shoulder as his voice took on an edge I rarely heard. The only chaos I see here is family members trying to sabotage someone's happiness. We're trying to save her from making a mistake she'll regret forever, Jessica protested, still dabbing at the coffee with inadequate napkins. The only mistake would be prioritizing other people's opinions over Grandma Rose's presence at our wedding, I said, standing up and taking David's hand. We're going forward with our plans, whether you approve or not. Patricia's face hardened into the expression I remembered from my teenage years when she decided I was being unreasonable. Then you're choosing that place over your family. I'm choosing love over control, I replied, walking toward the door with David beside me. Don't expect us to attend, Jessica called after us. I won't be part of something I'll be embarrassed to post about. I paused at the doorway and turned back to face them both. The people who truly love us will be there to celebrate. That's all that matters. As we walked back to our cars, David shook his head in amazement. Do they always treat you like that? Only when I refused to let them make my decisions for me. Well, they just made our planning easier. We know exactly who not to count on. But as I drove home with my great-grandmother's coffee-stained ring in my purse, I couldn't shake Patricia's final words, echoing in my head like a threat I wasn't sure how to interpret. The following week, David and I threw ourselves into wedding preparations with the determination of people on a mission. We met with Mrs. Henderson, the nursing home director, in her cheerful office overlooking the facility's garden courtyard. She was a warm woman in her 50s, with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent caring for elderly residents. I think your idea is wonderful, she said, spreading floor plans across her desk. Our residents so rarely get to witness joyful celebrations. This will bring happiness to everyone here. We want to make sure we're not disrupting their routines or causing any inconvenience, I said, still feeling protective after Jessica's fake review sabotage. Nonsense. Mrs. Thompson in room 12 used to be a wedding photographer, and she's already volunteering to help with decorations. Mr. Garcia was a florist for 40 years and has been sketching arrangement ideas since your grandmother mentioned the wedding. My heart swelled with gratitude for these strangers who were embracing our celebration more enthusiastically than my own family. There's something else, Mrs. Henderson continued. Your grandmother has been spending extra time with our activities coordinator, planning something special. She's been very secretive about it, but I can tell she's excited. What kind of something special? She won't say, but she's requested private access to our art therapy room several afternoons this week. Whatever she's working on, it's clearly important to her. David squeezed my hand under the table. Should we ask her about it? I think we should let her surprise us, I decided. She's given me so many surprises over the years. After our meeting with Mrs. Henderson, we spent the afternoon getting to know some of the other residents. The activities coordinator, an energetic young woman named Sarah, introduced us around the common areas like we were celebrities. This is Morgan Rose's granddaughter, she announced to a group playing cards in the sunroom. She's getting married here next weekend. An elegant woman with perfectly styled white hair looked up from her hand of bridge. How romantic, I'm Eleanor, and I used to plan events for the governor's mansion. If you need any assistance with coordination, I'd be delighted to help. That's incredibly generous, I said, genuinely touched. Honey, I haven't had this much excitement in years. Let me put my experience to good use. At the piano in the main lounge, we met Harold, a retired music teacher who was playing soft jazz for a small audience of residents. When he learned about our wedding, his weathered face lit up with enthusiasm. I would be honored to provide music for your ceremony, he said, his fingers dancing across the keys in a beautiful improvised melody. What's your favorite song? We haven't chosen processional music yet, David admitted. Then let me suggest something special. I'll arrange a medley that tells the story of lasting love. In the craft room, we discovered Dorothy, Grandma Rose's roommate, carefully working on an intricate needlepoint project. She was a tiny woman with bright eyes and surprisingly strong hands despite her age. Rose tells me you two are high school sweethearts who found your way back to each other, she said without looking up from her stitching. College, actually, I corrected, but we did reconnect after several years apart. That's the best kind of love story. I married my Harold after he came back from the war. We had 53 years together before he passed. She held up her needlework, revealing a beautiful sampler with wedding bells and our names. This is my contribution to your special day. The overwhelming kindness of these relative strangers contrasted sharply with my family's coldness. While Patricia and Jessica spent the week posting passive-aggressive social media updates about proper wedding etiquette and family disappointments, the nursing home residents embraced our celebration with pure joy. Meanwhile, Jessica's harassment campaign escalated beyond social media. She called David directly at his office, attempting to convince him that I was making an emotional decision that would damage his professional reputation. Morgan's always been impulsive, she told him during a 20-minute phone call he later described to me. She gets these romantic ideas without thinking about long-term consequences. Jessica, David had replied calmly, the only consequence I care about is making sure the woman I love feels supported and celebrated. But what will your clients think? Your business associates this venue choice sends a message about your judgment. It sends a message that I prioritize my fiancé's family relationships over other people's superficial opinions. Patricia took a different approach, launching a campaign on her real estate social media accounts about the importance of investing in your future and making decisions that reflect your values. Anyone following her posts could clearly see they were directed at me, though she never mentioned the wedding specifically. She also began texting me daily with links to last-minute wedding venues that had suddenly become available, each message accompanied by comments like, "This one has an opening next month," or "They're offering a discount for short notice bookings." Through it all, David remained my steady anchor. He spent his lunch breaks researching vendors who would work with our unique venue called his own family to update them on the details, and even drove to the nursing home twice to meet more residents and understand what made the place special. Your grandmother was in the garden when I visited yesterday, he told me over dinner. She was talking to the maintenance staff about something specific they could plant before next weekend. She's definitely up to something, I agreed. Mrs. Henderson mentioned she's been in the art therapy room every day this week. Should we be worried? With Grandma Rose, I've learned to trust her instincts. She's never steered me wrong. Meanwhile, my college friends rallied around us with the kind of support my family should have provided. My maid of honor, Claire, took charge of organizing decorations that would complement whatever the nursing home residents were planning. My other bridesmaids coordinated a potluck reception that could be served in the dining hall alongside the facility's regular dinner service. This is going to be more meaningful than any country club wedding, Claire declared during our planning session. You're creating something unique and beautiful. David's family proved equally supportive. His mother called to ask what she could bring to contribute to the celebration, and his father offered to coordinate parking since the nursing home lot was smaller than traditional wedding venues. We're just happy David found someone who values family the way he does, his mother Susan said during our phone conversation. Your grandmother sounds like a remarkable woman. As the week progressed, I found myself looking forward to our nursing home wedding more than I ever had to the original spring venue we'd planned. Every conversation with the residents revealed new layers of wisdom and experience that would enrich our celebration. But the secrecy around Grandma Rose's special project continued to build anticipation and slight anxiety. What was she working on in that art therapy room, and why was she being so mysterious about something that clearly brought her such joy? The answer would come sooner than expected in a way that would reveal just how much love and creativity could flourish in a place my family had dismissed as depressing and inappropriate. By Thursday afternoon, 3 days before our Saturday wedding, I had discovered that Sunset Manor was home to more talent and generosity than most professional wedding venues could offer. My daily visits to check on preparations had become opportunities to learn remarkable life stories that put my family's concerns about appearances into embarrassing perspective. Eleanor, the former governor's mansion event planner, had transformed into our unofficial wedding coordinator with military precision. She'd created detailed timelines coordinated with the kitchen staff for menu additions to complement their regular Saturday dinner service, and even arranged for additional seating in the garden courtyard where we decided to hold the ceremony. "Darling, I planned state dinners for foreign dignitaries," she told me while reviewing her 3-page checklist. "A intimate family wedding is pure joy in comparison." Harold, the retired music teacher, had been practicing wedding music every afternoon, and other residents had begun gathering around the piano to listen and offer suggestions. His arrangements of classic love songs had grown into mini concerts that brought residents from all over the facility. "I haven't had an audience this engaged in years," he confided after playing a particularly beautiful version of "The Way You Look Tonight." "Music is meant to be shared, and these folks appreciate every note." In the craft room, I discovered an entire network of residents contributing to our celebration. Dorothy had finished her needlepoint wedding sampler and started a second project, this one a table runner for our reception. Mrs. Patterson had been crocheting small flower boutonnieres for David's groomsmen, and Mr. Kim was carving wooden napkin rings with our initials. We don't get many opportunities to create things for young people starting their lives together," Mrs. Patterson explained, her arthritic fingers moving with surprising dexterity. "It makes us feel useful again." The most surprising discovery came when I met Agnes David's 78-year-old grandmother, who'd arrived 2 days early for the wedding. She'd immediately connected with Grandma Rose, and the two had been thick as thieves ever since. "Oh, your grandmother is a treasure," Agnes told me after spending the afternoon with Rose in the garden. "She's been showing me around like she owns the place, introducing me to all her friends." "How are you feeling about the wedding venue?" I asked, still sensitive to my family's criticism. "Honey, I've been to weddings in every kind of venue imaginable. The fancy ones with ice sculptures and 10-course dinners, the simple ones in church basements with potluck receptions. You want to know what made the difference, whether the couple was surrounded by people who genuinely loved them. And what do you think about this one?" Agnes gestured toward the dining room where Grandma Rose was teaching Harold a song from her childhood while other residents clapped along. "I think you found your people." Meanwhile, Patricia had discovered our wedding preparations were proceeding without her input, which triggered an escalation in her interference tactics. She arrived at the nursing home unannounced Thursday morning, clearly expecting to find a depressing institutional environment that would validate her objections. Instead, she encountered Eleanor directing the maintenance staff and hanging string lights in the garden courtyard, Harold practicing the wedding march with enthusiastic resident backup singers, and Mrs. Henderson reviewing catering details with the kitchen supervisor. "May I help you?" Mrs. Henderson asked politely when she found Patricia standing in the main lobby looking confused. "I'm Patricia Newman Morgan's mother. I wanted to inspect the facilities before my daughter makes a terrible mistake." Mrs. Henderson's professional smile never wavered, but her tone became noticeably cooler. "Of course. Would you like a tour?" For 30 minutes, Mrs. Henderson walked Patricia through the facility's amenities, introduced her to residents who were eagerly preparing for Saturday's celebration, and explained the care philosophy that made Sunset Manor feel more like a vibrant community than a medical institution. "As you can see, our residents live active, engaged lives," Mrs. Henderson concluded as they returned to the lobby. "Your daughter's wedding will bring joy to many people who've been looking forward to celebrating with her." Patricia's response revealed everything about her priorities. But what will this look like to our other family members? What will people think when they see wedding photos taken in a nursing home? "I imagine they'll think your daughter values her grandmother's presence over their superficial judgments," Mrs. Henderson replied calmly. After Patricia left clearly frustrated that she couldn't find institutional deficiencies to support her objections, Mrs. Henderson pulled me aside during my afternoon visit. "Your mother seems very concerned about appearances," she observed diplomatically. That's her primary consideration for most decisions, I admitted. Well, she should know that several of our residents are quite accomplished people. Eleanor worked in government. Harold was first chair violin with the City Symphony for 30 years, and Dorothy's late husband was a federal judge. If she's worried about the social appropriateness of your guest list, she can rest easy. But Patricia's visit had been reconnaissance for a more serious sabotage attempt. That evening, Jessica called to inform me she'd spent the day researching corporate complaints procedures for nursing home chains. I've drafted a formal complaint about Sunset Manor allowing disruptive events that interfere with resident care, she announced smugly. You're filing a complaint about my wedding. I'm filing a complaint about noise violations, disruption of medical routines, and inappropriate use of common areas for private events. Jessica, those residents are more excited about this wedding than they've been about anything in years. That's not the point. The point is that nursing homes aren't designed for social events, and the corporate office needs to know about facilities that aren't following proper protocols. David, who was listening on speakerphone, finally interrupted. Jessica, what exactly are you hoping to accomplish? I'm hoping to save my sister from public embarrassment and my family from being associated with this spectacle. By filing false complaints against elderly people who've been nothing but kind to us. By demonstrating that this venue is inappropriate for the kind of wedding Morgan deserves. After hanging up, I felt a combination of fury and heartbreak that my own sister would actively try to sabotage something that brought joy to so many people. But I was also worried about the potential impact on Sunset Manor if Jessica followed through on her threats. We should warn Mrs. Henderson about the complaint, David suggested. We should also document how excited the residents are about Saturday, I added. If anyone from corporate shows up, they'll see that this event is bringing happiness, not disruption. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Rose. Come to the art room tomorrow morning. I have something to show you. The mysterious project was finally going to be revealed, and despite Jessica's sabotage attempts and Patricia's disapproval, I felt a surge of anticipation for whatever surprise my grandmother had been working on so secretly. But first, we had to make sure Jessica's complaints didn't derail everything we'd been planning. The nursing home administrator had mentioned they were planning their own surprise for the wedding, and I wasn't about to let my sister's selfishness destroy the joy that so many people were creating together. Tomorrow would bring answers, revelations, and hopefully the strength to handle whatever new obstacles my family decided to throw in our path. But tonight, surrounded by David's love and the memory of all the kind faces at Sunset Manor, I felt more confident than ever that we were making the right choice. Friday morning arrived with an unexpected phone call that shattered my peaceful anticipation. Mrs. Henderson's usually calm voice carried an edge of stress that immediately set my nerves on high alert. Morgan, I need to speak with you urgently. Can you come in this morning? Of course. Is everything all right with Grandma Rose? Your grandmother is fine, but we've received some concerning complaints about tomorrow's wedding that require immediate attention. My stomach dropped as Jessica's threat from the previous evening came flooding back. What kind of complaints? Anonymous reports filed with our corporate office claiming that we're allowing disruptive events that interfere with resident care. The regional supervisor is driving down from the state capitol to investigate. I sank onto my kitchen counter stool, feeling the weight of my sister's sabotage crushing down on my chest. Mrs. Henderson, I'm so sorry. I know exactly who filed those complaints. Can you be here in an hour? I'd like to discuss our options before the supervisor arrives. During the drive to Sunset Manor, I called David at his office and explained the crisis. He immediately cleared his afternoon schedule to join me, and I could hear him typing furiously on his computer while we talked. I'm documenting everything Jessica said yesterday, he explained. If she filed false complaints, there should be consequences. I just don't want this to hurt the nursing home or affect their residents. Morgan, we're going to fight this. Those people have been nothing but wonderful to us. When I arrived at Sunset Manor, I found the atmosphere noticeably tense despite the staff's attempts to maintain normalcy. Mrs. Henderson met me in her office with a folder of printed emails and official complaint forms that made my heart sink further. "Well, the complaints are quite detailed," she said, spreading the documents across her desk. "Allegations of noise disruption, inappropriate use of common areas, violations of resident privacy, and concerns about outside vendors accessing the facility." I scanned the papers, recognizing Jessica's writing style in the carefully worded accusations. "These are completely fabricated. We've been working with your staff on every detail to ensure minimal disruption." "I know that, and my staff knows that, but corporate takes all complaints seriously. The supervisor wants to interview residents about their experiences with wedding preparations." "What does that mean for tomorrow?" Mrs. Henderson's expression grew sympathetic but worried. "It means we may have to postpone the ceremony until the investigation is complete." The thought of disappointing Grandma Rose and all the residents who'd been preparing so eagerly made tears spring to my eyes. How long would that take? Potentially several weeks. These corporate investigations are thorough. Just then, David arrived carrying a manila folder and wearing his most professional expression. He'd clearly come straight from a business meeting, still wearing his navy suit and tie. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson, I've been researching the complaint process for your parent company," he said, settling into the chair beside mine. "Anonymous complaints require corroborating evidence to trigger formal investigations." The supervisor mentioned they received multiple reports from different sources. David opened his folder and pulled out several printed screenshots. I suspected as much. These are social media posts from Morgan's sister Jessica, dating back to last week. "She's been coordinating a campaign against your facility." Mrs. Henderson studied the evidence with growing understanding. "These posts are encouraging people to file complaints about our wedding accommodations." And here, David continued producing more screenshots, are her direct messages to friends asking them to call your corporate office with concerns about patient safety and facility standards. I felt a mixture of vindication and heartbreak seeing my sister's manipulation tactics laid out in black and white. She orchestrated this entire complaint campaign. "Which means the reports aren't anonymous or independent," David concluded. "They're part of a coordinated harassment effort by someone with personal motivations to disrupt your wedding." Mrs. Henderson leaned back in her chair, relief beginning to replace worry on her face. "This evidence should help when I speak with the supervisor, but he's already en route and plans to interview residents this afternoon." "Then let him interview them," I said, sudden determination replacing my earlier panic. "Let him talk to Eleanor about the event, planning to Harold about the music, to Dorothy about the crafts they've been making. Those residents will tell him exactly how they feel about our wedding." "Are you sure some of them might feel pressured to say what they think an authority figure wants to hear?" "Mrs. Henderson, have you met Eleanor? She'll tell that supervisor exactly what she thinks, and it won't be what Jessica wants him to hear." David squeezed my hand under the table. "We should also be there when he interviews residents. As a people getting married, we have a right to respond to complaints about our event." "Actually, that's an excellent idea. Your presence would demonstrate transparency and cooperation." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang with Jessica's number on the display. I looked at David and Mrs. Henderson before answering on speaker. "Jessica." "Morgan, thank God. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday and I realize I may have been too harsh." The false sweetness in her voice made my skin crawl. "Too harsh about what specifically?" "About your wedding venue choice. I mean, if it's important to you, then family should support family, right?" I exchanged glances with David, who was shaking his head in disbelief at her transparent manipulation. "That's a very sudden change of heart, Jessica." "Well, I talked to some friends about it, and they helped me see your perspective. A nursing home wedding could actually be quite touching and meaningful." "What friends?" "Just some people from my marketing group. They said it could be a beautiful human interest story if it was handled properly. Red flags went off in my mind like emergency sirens. What kind of human interest story? Oh, local couple brings joy to elderly residents, heartwarming community celebration, that sort of thing. I might know some people in local media who would be interested. Mrs. Henderson was frantically shaking her head and making cutting motions across her throat. Jessica, we want a private family celebration, not a media event. But think about the positive exposure for the nursing home. They could use the good publicity, especially with all the negative stories about elder care facilities. The pieces clicked together in my head with sickening clarity. You filed complaints about the nursing home, and now you want to turn our wedding into a news story to make yourself look good. I have no idea what you're talking about, complaints, but I do think this could be a wonderful opportunity to show people a different side of senior care. Absolutely not. Morgan, be reasonable. I've already reached out to Channel 7 about a possible feature segment. You did what? They're very interested in covering your story. The producer said it would be perfect for their weekend human interest slot. Mrs. Henderson was now writing furious notes and gesturing for me to keep Jessica talking. Jessica, if any media shows up at our wedding, I'll have them removed. That seems ungrateful, considering how much effort I've put into helping you get positive coverage. You mean how much effort you've put into creating a publicity opportunity for yourself? I resent that accusation. I'm trying to help you make the best of an unfortunate venue choice. David leaned toward the phone. Jessica, this is David. Did you coordinate complaints against Sunset Manor with your marketing contacts? I don't know what you're implying, but I certainly haven't done anything inappropriate. So you're denying that you organized people to file false complaints about the nursing home? The pause before Jessica's answer told us everything we needed to know. Any concerns I've shared about elderly care facilities have been legitimate and in everyone's best interests, including the best interests of the residents who've been excited about our wedding for 2 weeks. David, you're obviously being influenced by Morgan's emotional thinking. Someone needs to consider the broader implications of this decision. I'd heard enough. Jessica, stay away from our wedding. Don't call the media, don't file any more complaints, and don't pretend you're trying to help us. Fine, but don't blame me when this whole thing becomes an embarrassing disaster. After hanging up, I turned to Mrs. Henderson with renewed determination. When is that supervisor arriving? Within the hour. Then let's make sure he gets the real story about what's been happening here. But as we prepared to defend our wedding against my sister's sabotage, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica's mention of media coverage was more than just another manipulation tactic. She'd planted seeds for turning our private celebration into a public spectacle, and I had no idea how far she was willing to go to get her way. The supervisor's investigation would determine whether our wedding could proceed as planned, but Jessica's media connections represented a different kind of threat entirely, one that could turn tomorrow from the intimate celebration we'd envisioned into something we'd never intended. The corporate supervisor turned out to be a surprisingly understanding man named Mr. Davidson, who spent 3 hours interviewing residents and reviewing our wedding preparations. By the time he finished talking to Eleanor, Harold, Dorothy, and 6 other residents, his initial skepticism had transformed into genuine admiration for the community spirit our celebration had generated. In 30 years of facility oversight, I've rarely seen residents this engaged and enthusiastic about anything, he told Mrs. Henderson as we gathered in her office. The complaints appear to be completely unfounded. Whoa, what about the coordination campaign? David asked, producing more evidence of Jessica's social media manipulation. Mr. Davidson studied the screenshots with obvious distaste. This kind of targeted harassment is exactly why we investigate complaint sources. I'll be filing a report that clears the facility of any wrongdoing and flags the false complaints for review. After he left, I felt a tremendous weight lift from my shoulders, but exhaustion from the emotional stress left me drained. Mrs. Henderson suggested I visit with Grandma Rose, who'd been asking for me all afternoon. She's been in the art therapy room again, Mrs. Henderson said with a mysterious smile. I think she's finally ready to show you what she's been working on. I found Grandma Rose sitting at a large table covered with art supplies, her silver hair pinned back and her lavender cardigan spotted with paint. At 82, she still moved with purpose and grace, though I could see the subtle signs of her illness in the way she held her shoulders and the careful way she stood from her chair. Morgan, sweetheart, perfect timing. Her voice carried the same warmth that had comforted me through childhood heartbreaks and teenage dramas. I have something to show you. But first, sit down. We need to talk. The seriousness in her tone made my stomach flutter with anxiety. Is everything all right? Everything is exactly as it should be, which is why we need to have this conversation. She patted the chair beside her, and I sat close enough to smell her familiar perfume, the same white shoulders she'd worn my entire life. Grandma Rose, if this is about the complaints and the investigation... Hush, child. I know all about your sister's foolishness and your mother's misplaced priorities. That's not what we need to discuss. She turned to face me fully, her clear blue eyes holding mine with an intensity that reminded me she'd been navigating life's complexities for 8 decades. Morgan, I know about Dr. Williams' prognosis. My heart stopped. What do you know? I know I have weeks, not months. I've known since the first test results came back. Her voice remained steady and calm, as if she were discussing weekend plans instead of her own mortality. But you told him not to discuss the timeline with you. I told him not to discuss it because I didn't want you children making emotional decisions based on fear and sadness. She reached for my hand with her soft, warm fingers. I wanted you to choose this wedding venue because it felt right, not because you felt obligated to accommodate a dying old woman. Tears started flowing down my cheeks despite my efforts to stay strong. You've been protecting us this whole time. I've been living, sweetheart. Every day I wake up in this wonderful place surrounded by good people who've become my chosen family. I feel grateful for another opportunity to experience joy. She gestured around the art therapy room, which I now noticed was filled with completed projects covering every surface. Watercolor paintings, pottery pieces, fabric crafts, and wood carvings created a gallery of resident artwork. This place isn't where people come to die, Morgan. It's where people come to live fully in whatever time they have left. Your mother and sister see institutional care and medical equipment. I see community, creativity, friendship, and purpose. Is that what you've been working on, art projects? Grandma Rose's face lit up with the same expression she'd worn when I was 7, and she was teaching me to bake her famous sugar cookies. I've been working on something very special for your wedding day. She led me to a covered easel in the corner of the room and carefully pulled away the cloth draping. Underneath was the most beautiful painting I'd ever seen, a watercolor garden scene filled with every flower imaginable, painted in soft pastels that seemed to glow with inner light. Grandma Rose, this is incredible. Oh, look closer, she said, pointing to details I'd missed at first glance. As I studied the painting more carefully, I began to recognize elements from my life woven throughout the garden scene. The yellow roses were the same variety that grew outside my childhood bedroom window. The white peonies matched the flowers from my high school graduation bouquet. The purple irises were identical to the ones David brought me on our first date after we reconnected. You painted our love story in flowers. Every bloom represents a memory we've shared, a moment of growth or a hope for your future. Her finger traced the painted path that wound through the garden. This will be the backdrop for your wedding ceremony tomorrow. I threw my arms around her, breathing in her familiar scent and feeling overwhelmed by the love and effort she'd put into creating something so personal and meaningful. There's more, she said, pulling back with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. She led me to another table where multiple smaller canvases were arranged like a storybook. Each painting depicted a different scene, and I realized she'd created an entire visual narrative. These are table centerpieces for your reception. Each one tells the story of a great love that lasted through challenges. The first painting showed a young couple dancing under stars. The second depicted the same couple holding hands through what appeared to be difficult times. The sequence continued through parenthood aging and ultimately showed elderly hands still intertwined. But Grandma, when did you have time to create all this? Time moves differently when you're doing something you love for someone you love, she said simply. Besides, I've had help. As if summoned by her words, Dorothy appeared in the doorway carrying a tea service on a rolling cart. I hope you don't mind the interruption, but I thought you might want refreshments while Rose shows you our collaboration. Our collaboration? Dorothy wheeled the cart closer, and I noticed the tea set was unlike anything I'd seen in the nursing home dining room. The cups and saucers were delicate porcelain, painted with flowers that matched Grandma Rose's artwork. Well, Rose painted the designs and I fired them in the ceramics kiln, Dorothy explained proudly. We've been working together for 2 weeks to create a complete tea service for your reception. The thoughtfulness and skill that had gone into these handmade wedding gifts left me speechless. While my family had been complaining about appearances and social expectations, my grandmother and her friends had been pouring love and creativity into making our day special. There's something else we need to discuss, Grandma Rose said, settling into her chair with the careful movements that reminded me of her fragility. Your inheritance. Grandma, you don't need to worry about that right now. Actually, I do. I've been meeting with my lawyer to update my will, and there are things you need to know. She pulled an envelope from her cardigan pocket, the same place she'd always kept important papers and emergency chocolate when I was growing up. Morgan, I own the house on Maple Street where you grew up visiting me. I thought you sold that house when you moved here. I let your mother believe I sold it because I didn't want her pressuring me to give her the money, but I've been renting it to a lovely young family and the income has allowed me to make this place feel like home. My head was spinning with revelations. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm leaving the house to you along with my savings and investments. Your mother and sister don't know about most of it. Grandma Rose, listen to me, sweetheart. I'm making this decision based on what I've witnessed over the past few weeks. You're the only one in our family who understands that love matters more than money, that relationships matter more than appearances. The weight of her words settled over me like a warm blanket and a heavy responsibility at the same time. But what about Mom and Jessica? They'll receive family heirlooms and sentimental items, but the bulk of my estate goes to someone who shares my values. Her voice grew firm with conviction. Someone who chooses to include an old woman in her wedding instead of hiding her away. Before I could respond, a soft knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Sarah, the activities coordinator, peeked in with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Rose, you asked me to remind you about your medication time. Grandma Rose stood slowly and I noticed a slight tremor in her hands that hadn't been there an hour ago. Of course, dear. Morgan, will you help me back to my room? I think I need to rest before tomorrow's excitement. As we walked slowly through the corridors, passing other residents who smiled and wished us well for tomorrow's ceremony, I felt the full impact of everything Grandma Rose had revealed. She was dying, but she was using her remaining time to create beauty and share wisdom. She was leaving me her life's savings, but more importantly, she was teaching me what family really meant. And tomorrow, surrounded by people who understood the value of love over appearances, I was going to marry the man who supported every choice I made. But first, I needed to help my grandmother rest, because even though she was handling her illness with grace and courage, I could see that the effort of revealing her secrets had exhausted her more than she wanted to admit. The next morning would bring our wedding day and all the challenges and joys that came with choosing love over family expectations. At 6:30 that evening, just as I was heading home to prepare for tomorrow's wedding, Sarah burst into Grandma Rose's room where we'd been arranging her medications for the weekend. "Mrs. Rose, you need to sit down immediately," Sarah said, her voice tight with professional concern. I turned to see my grandmother swaying slightly, one hand pressed against the wall for support. Her face had gone pale and she was breathing more rapidly than normal. "I'm fine, dear," Grandma Rose said, but her voice sounded weaker than it had an hour ago, just a little tired from all the excitement. "Grandma, please sit," I urged, guiding her to her favorite armchair by the window. Sarah was already checking Grandma Rose's pulse and reaching for the emergency call button. "Mrs. Rose, I'm gonna have the nurse take a look at you, okay?" Within minutes, the room filled with medical staff. The head nurse, a competent woman named Linda, took Grandma Rose's vital signs while asking questions about pain levels and symptoms. I stood against the wall feeling helpless and terrified. "Her blood pressure is quite low and her heart rate is irregular," Linda reported to Dr. Williams, who'd arrived with remarkable speed. "Mrs. Rose, are you experiencing any chest pain or difficulty breathing?" "Just tired," Grandma Rose repeated, but I could see her gripping the armchair with unusual force. Dr. Williams listened to her heart and lungs with serious concentration before turning to Linda with quiet instructions I couldn't hear. The atmosphere in the room shifted to urgent efficiency that made my stomach drop with dread. "We need to transport her to the hospital for monitoring," Dr. Williams told me gently. "This could be a medication adjustment issue, but we want to be cautious given her overall condition." "But the wedding is tomorrow," I said stupidly, as if that could somehow prevent a medical emergency. "I know, sweetheart," Grandma Rose said from her chair, reaching for my hand, "but we need to make sure everything is all right." The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, and I watched paramedics carefully transfer my grandmother onto a gurney. She looked so small and fragile against the white sheets, nothing like the vibrant woman who'd been showing me her artwork an hour earlier. "I'll follow you to the hospital," I told the lead paramedic. "Meet us in the emergency department at General Hospital," he replied, already focused on monitoring equipment. During the terrifying drive across town, I called David, my mother, and Jessica, delivering the same message each time Grandma Rose was in the hospital, and I didn't know how serious it was. Patricia and Jessica arrived at the emergency waiting room within 30 minutes, both looking genuinely shaken. Whatever our differences about the wedding, the possibility of losing Grandma Rose united us in immediate concern. "What did the doctor say?" Patricia asked, settling into an uncomfortable plastic chair beside me. "They're running tests to determine what caused the episode." Her blood pressure dropped and her heart rhythm became irregular. Jessica sat across from us, her usual perfect makeup smudged from crying during the drive. "Is she awake? Can we see her?" "They're stabilizing her first, then we can visit one at a time." For the next 2 hours, we sat together in the sterile waiting room, suspended between hope and fear. Patricia bought terrible coffee from vending machines. Jessica found magazines none of us could concentrate on reading, and I stared at my phone, hoping for updates from the medical team. Around 9 o'clock, Dr. Williams appeared in the waiting room doorway with an expression that could have meant anything. "She's stable," he said immediately, and I felt my lungs expand with relief. The episode was related to medication interactions and dehydration, both of which we can manage. "Can we see her?" I asked. "Yes, but she's quite weak. Short visits would be best." I went in first, finding Grandma Rose connected to monitors and an IV drip, but awake and alert. Her color had returned to normal, and she managed a weak smile when she saw me. "There's my beautiful bride," she whispered. "Grandma, you scared us so much." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. My body picked a terrible time to be dramatic." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "But listen to me carefully. This wedding is happening tomorrow, exactly as planned. We should postpone." "Absolutely not." Her voice gained power from sheer determination. "I've been looking forward to this day for weeks, and a little medical inconvenience isn't going to stop me from seeing you married." But what if you're not well enough? Morgan, I'm dying anyway. I'd rather spend my remaining time celebrating love than worrying about medical complications. Her blunt honesty brought tears to my eyes, but also a strange sense of peace. This was vintage Grandma Rose facing reality head on while choosing joy over fear. Can I send in Mom and Jessica? Of course, but Morgan, there's something in my nightstand drawer at the nursing home, an envelope with your name on it. Make sure you get it before tomorrow. Patricia's visit with Grandma Rose lasted 15 minutes, and when she emerged, her eyes were red with tears I hadn't seen since my father's funeral. She's asking for Jessica now, Patricia said, settling heavily into her chair beside me. How is she really? Weak, but determined to attend your wedding. Patricia looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She told me some things that made me realize I've been focusing on the wrong priorities. What kind of things? Family things, love things, things I should have remembered without needing a reminder from a hospital bed. Jessica's visit was shorter but equally emotional. When she returned to the waiting room, she was crying openly and clutching tissues. She made me promise the wedding would be beautiful, Jessica said through her tears. She said it's going to be the most important thing that happens to our family this year. Dr. Williams returned around 10:30 with more detailed information about Grandma Rose's condition and the plan for tomorrow. Hey, she can attend the wedding if certain conditions are met, he explained. She'll need wheelchair assistance, regular medication monitoring, and someone medically trained should be present throughout the ceremony. The nursing home staff will be there, I said quickly, and we're having the ceremony at the facility, so her medical records and equipment are all available. In that case, I think we can make this work. She'll need to rest tonight and take it easy tomorrow, but short term, she should be fine for your celebration. The relief that washed over me felt like warm sunshine after a terrible storm. Our wedding could proceed, Grandma Rose would be there, and despite the scare, everything would work out. But as we prepared to leave the hospital with plans to return early tomorrow morning, Grandma Rose called me back to her bedside. Morgan, there's something else you need to know, she whispered, glancing toward the door to make sure we were alone. What is it? That envelope I mentioned, it contains more than just sentimental items. It contains information that will change how you see our family. What kind of information? Tomorrow, after the ceremony, when things are calm, read it carefully and remember that sometimes the people we think we know best are the ones hiding the most important secrets. Her mysterious words followed me home that night, adding another layer of anticipation and anxiety to everything I was already feeling about tomorrow. But for now, all that mattered was that Grandma Rose would be there to see me marry David, surrounded by people who understood that love was worth celebrating no matter where it happened. The morning would bring our wedding day, along with whatever secrets that envelope contained and whatever other surprises our complicated family had in store. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect October day that makes everything feel possible. I woke up in our apartment with sunlight streaming through the bedroom windows and David's arms wrapped around me for the last time as an unmarried couple. How are you feeling, Mrs. Soon-to-be Mitchell? He murmured into my hair. Nervous, excited, grateful, and slightly terrified, I admitted, but mostly happy. We decided to get ready separately, following the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony, so David headed to his best man's house while I drove to Sunset Manor to prepare with the residents who would become my chosen wedding party. The nursing home was buzzing with activity when I arrived at 8 a.m. Eleanor had transformed into a wedding coordinator general, directing maintenance staff and hanging the last of the string lights while reviewing her detailed timeline with Mrs. Henderson. "Good morning, bride," Eleanor called cheerfully. "Your grandmother is doing beautifully this morning and is already dressed and ready for photographs." I found Grandma Rose in her room wearing the lavender dress we'd chosen together, along with the pearl necklace she'd worn to her own wedding 60 years ago. Despite yesterday's hospital stay, she looked radiant and alert. "You look beautiful, Grandma." "I feel wonderful, sweetheart, ready for the most important day of the year." Dorothy was putting finishing touches on Grandma Rose's hair, styling it in soft waves that made her look elegant and timeless. "We've been up since 6 getting ready," Dorothy said proudly. "Rose wanted to look perfect for your special day." In the activities room, I found my dress hanging carefully on a professional garment rack that Eleanor had somehow procured overnight. Claire and my other bridesmaids had arrived early and were setting up an impromptu bridal preparation station with mirrors, makeup, and the bouquet we'd ordered from Mr. Garcia's recommended florist. "Morgan, this place is magical," my maid of honor, Claire said, gesturing toward the garden courtyard visible through the large windows. "I've never seen a more beautiful wedding venue." And it truly was magical. The string lights Eleanor had supervised created a canopy of warm light over the ceremony area. Harold's piano had been moved to the garden, where he was practicing processional music while other residents gathered around to listen. The flower arrangements that combined professional florist work with Mr. Garcia's handmade additions created an atmosphere of elegant celebration. But the most beautiful sight was watching the nursing home residents preparing to be part of our wedding. They dressed in their finest clothes, with several wearing suits and formal dresses I hadn't seen during my regular visits. They moved through the facility with purpose and joy, each contributing something special to the celebration. As I was having my hair styled by a local beautician Claire had arranged, Mrs. Henderson appeared with concerning news that made my stomach drop. "Morgan, your mother and sister have arrived, and they brought some unexpected guests." "What kind of unexpected guests?" "A professional photographer and videographer, along with someone who appears to be from a television station." My blood ran cold as Jessica's threats about media coverage came flooding back. "Where are they now?" "In the parking lot setting up equipment. Your mother is explaining to the photographer about the best angles for the garden ceremony." I stood up abruptly, my hair half finished and my dress still hanging on its rack. They turned our wedding into a media event without asking. Claire immediately stepped into damage control mode. "What do you want to do? I can go handle this." "We all go handle this," I decided. "This is supposed to be a private family celebration, not a publicity opportunity." I threw on jeans and a sweater over my wedding undergarments and marched outside with my bridesmaids flanking me like protective bodyguards. In the parking lot, I found exactly what Mrs. Henderson had described: a professional camera crew, a reporter checking her makeup in a compact mirror, and Patricia directing the photographer toward the best lighting for exterior shots. "What is this?" I demanded, approaching the group with barely controlled anger. Patricia turned with a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Surprise, Jessica arranged for some beautiful coverage of your special day." I specifically said no media coverage. Jessica emerged from behind the news van wearing a perfectly coordinated outfit and her most professional demeanor. "Morgan, this is a wonderful opportunity to show people how meaningful senior care can be. The story will inspire other families." "This story is private. It's our wedding, not your public relations campaign." The reporter, a polished woman in her 30s, stepped forward with practiced smoothness. "I'm Linda Chen from Channel 7. We'd love to feature your heartwarming wedding story on our weekend community segment. And I'd love for you to leave our private ceremony alone." Patricia's fake smile faltered. "Morgan, don't be ungrateful. This kind of coverage could help the nursing home's reputation." "The nursing home's reputation is fine without exploiting our wedding for television content." David's voice cut through the tension from behind me. "What's going on here?" I turned to see him approaching with his groomsmen all dressed in their wedding attire and looking confused by the media circus in the parking lot. "My family decided to invite television coverage without consulting us," I explained. David's expression hardened as he took in the camera equipment and news crew. "I'm David Mitchell, the groom, and I'm asking you to leave our private wedding venue immediately." But we drove all the way from the city, the reporter protested. That's unfortunate, but this is a private event on private property. Jessica stepped between David and the reporter with her most persuasive expression. David, think about the positive exposure this could bring to your business. Local entrepreneur celebrates meaningful wedding supports, senior community. Jessica, if you don't remove this news crew right now, you're not welcome at our ceremony either. The confrontation was drawing attention from nursing home residents who'd gathered at the windows to watch the commotion. I could see Grandma Rose in her wheelchair near the main entrance, looking concerned about the chaos outside. Fine, Patricia said sharply. If you want to reject this generous opportunity, that's your choice. But don't blame us when you realize you've missed a chance for positive publicity. I'll take that risk, I replied. It took another 20 minutes of firm requests before the media crew finally packed up their equipment and left. The reporter made sure to get business cards from Jessica and Patricia before departing, clearly hoping to maintain contact for future story opportunities. As the news van disappeared down the street, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness that my own family had tried to turn our intimate celebration into a public spectacle. Are you okay? David asked, pulling me close. I'm better now that they're gone, but I can't believe Mom and Jessica thought ambushing us with reporters was appropriate. Claire checked her watch and made a practical announcement. We have 2 hours until ceremony time. Let's focus on getting you beautiful and married. Back inside the nursing home, I found the residents buzzing with excitement about the drama they'd witnessed from the windows. That was quite a show, Harold said from his position at the piano. Your young man handled those reporters like a seasoned professional. Thank you for supporting us, I said, feeling grateful for their understanding. Honey, we've seen enough family drama over the years to recognize it when it happens, Eleanor said wisely. What matters is that you're surrounded by people who want to celebrate your happiness. As I returned to getting ready, I noticed Patricia and Jessica conferring quietly near the main entrance, clearly planning their next move. Jessica was typing frantically on her phone, probably reaching out to her media contacts about alternate coverage options. But for the moment, I chose to focus on the love and support surrounding me from unexpected sources. The nursing home residents had created a celebration more beautiful and meaningful than anything my mother's country club connections could have arranged. In 2 hours, I would marry David in a garden ceremony surrounded by people who understood that love was worth celebrating regardless of the venue. And Grandma Rose would be there to witness it all, which was the only family approval that truly mattered. The morning's drama had reminded me exactly why we'd chosen this path and exactly who deserved to be part of our special day. At 2 o'clock, sharp Harold began playing the processional music he'd arranged specifically for our ceremony, a beautiful medley that started with Canon in D and transitioned into The Way You Look Tonight. The garden courtyard at Sunset Manor had been transformed into something that belonged in a fairy tale, with white chairs arranged in intimate rows and Grandma Rose's hand-painted backdrop creating the perfect altar setting. 60 people had gathered for our ceremony, split evenly between our close friends, David's family, and the nursing home residents who'd become as important to us as blood relatives. The afternoon sunshine filtered through the trees, casting dancing shadows across the flower arrangements that combined professional blooms with Mr. Garcia's handmade touches. I stood in the doorway leading from the facility to the garden, wearing my grandmother's pearl earrings and the dress that had felt perfect the moment I tried it on. Claire had done a beautiful job with my hair, creating soft curls that complemented the garden setting, and my makeup was natural enough to look like myself, but special enough for photographs. David stood at the makeshift altar with the nursing home chaplain who'd volunteered to officiate our ceremony. He looked incredibly handsome in his navy suit, and when our eyes met across the garden, his smile was so full of love that I felt my heart skip several beats. But the most beautiful sight was Grandma Rose in the front row, sitting in her wheelchair but looking radiant in her lavender dress. Despite yesterday's medical scare, she appeared strong and alert, holding a small bouquet of purple irises that matched the ones in her painted backdrop. Patricia and Jessica sat in the second row, having arrived separately after their media ambush failed. They'd both dressed appropriately for the occasion, though I could see Jessica discreetly taking photos with her phone despite our requests for privacy. As I began my walk down the short aisle, accompanied by Harold's beautiful piano music and the warm smiles of our guests, I felt overwhelming gratitude for everyone who'd chosen to celebrate with us. David's parents beamed from their seats beside Grandma Rose, and his siblings had tears in their eyes as they watched me approach. The nursing home residents had positioned themselves throughout the audience, and their faces showed pure joy at witnessing a celebration of love in their home. Eleanor had claimed a prime viewing spot and was wiping away tears with a lace handkerchief while Dorothy sat beside her, making encouraging gestures. When I reached David at the altar, he took my hands and whispered, "You look absolutely perfect." "So do you," I whispered back, feeling like the luckiest person in the world. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. The chaplain spoke about love that transcends circumstances and families that are built on choice as well as biology. David's vows brought tears to my eyes as he promised to always support my decisions and prioritize our happiness together. When it came time for my vows, I looked out at our gathered guests and felt the words flow from my heart. "David, you've shown me what it means to be truly supported and understood. You've stood beside me through family conflicts and difficult decisions, always encouraging me to follow my heart. Today, surrounded by people who've shown us incredible kindness and generosity, I promise to build a life with you based on love, respect, and the courage to choose happiness over other people's expectations." But the most unexpected moment came after we'd exchanged rings and been pronounced husband and wife. As David and I shared our first kiss as a married couple, Grandma Rose surprised everyone by slowly standing from her wheelchair. "Wait," she said in a voice that carried across the entire garden. "I have something to say." The audience turned to look at her as she steadied herself against her walker and took a deep breath. For a moment, I worried she was having another medical episode, but her voice was strong and clear when she began speaking. "I've attended many weddings in my 82 years in churches and country clubs, hotel ballrooms, and backyard gardens, but I've never seen a celebration that better demonstrated what marriage really means." She paused, looking directly at Patricia and Jessica before continuing. "These young people chose to include an old woman in their special day instead of hiding her away. They chose a venue that brought joy to an entire community instead of impressing strangers. They chose love over appearances, inclusion over exclusion, kindness over convenience." Her words carried a weight that silenced even the birdsong in the surrounding trees. "Patricia, Jessica, you've been worried about what people will think about this wedding. Let me tell you what I think. I think this is what love looks like when it's real and selfless and brave. I think these children understand what family means better than some of us who've had longer to learn." Tears were flowing freely among our guests, including Patricia, who was holding Jessica's hand as they both listened to Grandma Rose's words. "Ms. Morgan and David, your wedding has reminded everyone here that the most important celebrations aren't about money or status or impressing other people. They're about gathering the people you love and declaring your commitment in front of witnesses who will support that commitment through whatever comes next." The spontaneous applause that followed her speech filled the garden with joy and validation. Even Harold abandoned his piano to clap enthusiastically, and several residents called out congratulations that made everyone laugh through their tears. But Grandma Rose wasn't finished. She reached into her small purse and pulled out an envelope that I recognized as the one she'd mentioned in the hospital. Morgan, this contains something I want you to have today, but read it later when things are quiet. As our guests began moving toward the reception area, I helped Grandma Rose back into her wheelchair and leaned down to hear what she wanted to tell me privately. That speech wasn't just for you and David, she whispered. It was for your mother and sister who needed to hear what I've been trying to teach them for years. Do you think it made a difference? Look at them, she said, nodding toward Patricia and Jessica, who were both wiping away tears and talking quietly together. Sometimes people need to see love in action before they can understand it in theory. The reception that followed was unlike any wedding celebration I'd ever attended. The nursing home residents mingled with our friends and family, sharing stories and laughter that created connections across generations. Eleanor had coordinated with the kitchen staff to create a menu that accommodated both wedding guests and the residents' regular dinner service, resulting in a feast that satisfied everyone. Harold continued providing musical entertainment with requests from the audience, and several residents shared tales of their own weddings that had the entire room alternating between laughter and tears. David's grandmother Agnes hit it off immediately with Dorothy, and they spent the evening comparing stories about their late husbands. The wedding cake, created by the facility's former pastry chef resident, was a masterpiece of elegant simplicity that tasted even better than it looked. As David and I cut the first slice together, surrounded by applause and cheers, I felt like we were exactly where we belonged. But the most meaningful moment came near the end of the evening when Patricia approached me with an expression I hadn't seen since childhood. Morgan, can we talk privately for a moment? We stepped into a quiet corner of the dining room where she struggled to find words for several minutes before finally speaking. Your grandmother was right about everything, she said simply. I've been focusing on the wrong things and I'm sorry. Mom, no, let me finish. Watching you today, seeing how happy everyone is, realizing how much love went into creating this celebration, I understand now why this was the right choice. For the first time in years, my mother hugged me with genuine warmth instead of social obligation. I'm proud of you for choosing love over convenience, she whispered, and I'm ashamed that I tried to talk you out of it. As the evening wound down and guests began saying their goodbyes, I reflected on how perfectly everything had turned out, despite all the obstacles and opposition we'd faced. Our wedding had been exactly what we'd envisioned: intimate, meaningful, and filled with people who genuinely cared about our happiness. But as I tucked Grandma Rose's mysterious envelope into my purse for later reading, I had no idea that the most surprising revelations of the day were still to come. The reception transformed the nursing home dining room into something magical that rivaled any upscale wedding venue. Eleanor had worked with the facility's activities director to create an atmosphere that honored both celebration and the residents' comfort, using soft lighting and carefully arranged seating that encouraged mingling between our wedding guests and the nursing home community. The buffet table showcased an incredible collaboration between professional catering and resident contributions. Mrs. Patterson had spent days preparing her famous dinner rolls. Mr. Garcia had created floral arrangements for each table using flowers from his own garden therapy sessions, and the facility's former executive chef, a distinguished gentleman named Robert, had worked with the kitchen staff to prepare signature dishes that elevated the standard dining room fare. In my 40 years of restaurant management, Robert told David and me as we admired the spread, I never had more enthusiastic sous chefs than the residents who helped prepare your wedding feast. Harold's piano performance had evolved into an interactive musical experience with residents and wedding guests, taking turns requesting songs that told stories about love, family, and life experiences. When David's teenage nephew asked for contemporary music, Harold surprised everyone by launching into a jazz arrangement of a current pop song that had the entire room applauding. How did you know that song? The young man asked in amazement. My great-granddaughter visits every week and keeps me updated on what young people are listening to, Harold replied with a wink. Music connects all generations when you know how to translate it. Claire had abandoned her maid of honor duties to deep conversation with Eleanor about event planning techniques, while David's groomsmen were engaged in what appeared to be intense storytelling with several male residents who were sharing war stories and career adventures. But the most surprising conversation was happening at table 3, where a elegant woman with silver hair had captured Patricia and Jessica's complete attention. "I'm sorry, could you repeat your name?" Patricia was asking, leaning forward with unusual focus. "Margaret Thompson," the woman replied in a cultured voice that suggested years of education and refinement. "I was wondering if you might be related to Michael Newman, who used to visit our facility regularly about 8 years ago." My conversation with David's parents stopped mid-sentence as I recognized the name of my deceased father being mentioned across the room. "Michael was my husband," Patricia said slowly, "but I don't understand. He never mentioned visiting a nursing home." "Oh my, he visited every Friday afternoon for almost 2 years," Margaret continued. "He was part of our volunteer reading program, and he also helped several residents with financial planning and legal document preparation." Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. "Our father volunteered here at this nursing home?" "Every week, without fail. He was particularly helpful to residents who needed assistance understanding insurance benefits and estate planning. Your father had such patience for explaining complicated financial matters in terms we could understand." I stood up from my table and walked over, drawn by this unexpected revelation about my father's secret activities. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, settling into an empty chair beside her, "I'm Morgan Michael's daughter. I had no idea he spent time here." Margaret's face lit up with recognition. "Morgan, your father talked about you constantly. He was so proud of your college achievements and your career ambitions. He used to say you had inherited his sense of social responsibility." Patricia was staring at Margaret as if she were speaking a foreign language. "I don't understand. Michael never mentioned volunteering anywhere. He said he worked late on Friday afternoons." "He was very modest about his charitable activities," Margaret explained gently. "He said his family was busy with their own pursuits and wouldn't be interested in hearing about elderly strangers' problems." The implications of Margaret's words settled over our table like a revelation that reframed years of family history. My father had been secretly volunteering at the very nursing home where we'd chosen to hold our wedding, helping residents with exactly the kind of practical support that demonstrated genuine care. "Mrs. Thompson," I asked carefully, "do you know why he stopped volunteering?" Margaret's expression grew sad. "He became ill quite suddenly. The last time we saw him, he mentioned he was going to focus on spending time with his family while he could." "That was right before his cancer diagnosis," Jessica whispered. "He left something for your family." Margaret continued, reaching into a small purse beside her chair. "I've been wondering for years how to get this to you." She produced a manila envelope sealed with tape and labeled in my father's familiar handwriting, "For my daughters when they're ready to understand." Patricia accepted the envelope with trembling hands, her composed real estate agent demeanor completely abandoned. "What is this?" "Letters he wrote during his last visits here. He said he wanted to make sure his daughters knew how much he loved them and what he hoped they would remember about his values." The dining room celebration continued around us, but our little table had become suspended in time as we processed this unexpected connection between my father's memory and our chosen wedding venue. "Morgan," Margaret said, turning to me with a gentle smile, "your father would be so proud that you chose to have your wedding here. He often said this place represented the best of community spirit and intergenerational connection. He said that he believed that how a community treats its elderly residents reflects its true character. He would love that you brought joy and celebration into this space instead of viewing it as a place to be hidden away." David had joined our conversation, listening with the same amazement I felt about these revelations. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, Would you mind sharing some of your memories of Michael with us? We'd love to hear about this side of him that the family never knew. For the next 30 minutes, Margaret regaled us with stories about my father's Friday afternoon visits. He'd read newspapers to residents with vision problems, helped organize legal documents for people whose families lived far away, and even coordinated holiday gift drives for residents who rarely receive visitors. He had a particular soft spot for residents whose families had stopped visiting, Margaret explained. He said everyone deserved to feel valued and remembered regardless of their circumstances. Patricia was crying openly by the time Margaret finished sharing her memories, clutching the unopened envelope as if it contained treasures beyond imagination. I feel terrible that I never knew about any of this, Patricia said. Michael was doing exactly the kind of community service I always claimed was important, but I was too focused on my own career to notice. Mom, he chose not to tell us, I pointed out gently. Maybe he didn't want recognition, just the satisfaction of helping people who needed assistance. Jessica, who had been unusually quiet throughout Margaret's revelations, finally spoke up. This explains why you chose this place for your wedding. On some level, you must have sensed the connection. I chose it because Grandma Rose lives here and the people are wonderful, I corrected. But learning about Dad's involvement makes it feel like he's here celebrating with us. Margaret reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Your father often said he hoped his daughters would find partners who shared their values and supported their dreams. From what I've observed today, he would be delighted with your choice. As if summoned by our conversation, Grandma Rose appeared beside our table in her wheelchair, looking tired but content after the long day of celebration. Margaret, I see you've been sharing stories about Michael, Grandma Rose said with a knowing smile. You knew about Dad's volunteering, I asked. Sweetheart, who do you think suggested he start coming here in the first place? When I moved into Sunset Manor, I mentioned how much the residents would benefit from someone with financial expertise. Your father volunteered immediately. The interconnected revelations were overwhelming. My father had been secretly volunteering at my grandmother's nursing home, helping residents with practical needs while building the kind of intergenerational relationships that our wedding celebration was demonstrating. Grandma Rose, why didn't you ever mention this? Because your father asked me not to. He said his charitable work wasn't about getting credit from family members, it was about serving people who needed assistance. Patricia was now holding both the sealed envelope from Margaret and the earlier envelope Grandma Rose had given me, as if they contained the keys to understanding her deceased husband's true character. I think we should read these together, she said, looking around the table at all of us, as a family. But before anyone could respond, Mrs. Henderson approached our table with an expression that combined concern and excitement. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but we've received several phone calls about your wedding that I think you should know about. My stomach dropped as I imagined Jessica's media contacts creating problems, despite our earlier success in removing the news crew from our ceremony. What kind of phone calls? Congratulatory calls from other families asking about holding similar celebrations here. Apparently, word has spread through social media about your beautiful wedding, and people are interested in learning about nursing home venue options for their own events. I looked at Jessica, who was suddenly very interested in her dessert plate. Jessica, what did you post online about our wedding? Just some photos from the reception, she said defensively. People deserve to see how beautiful everything turned out. But Margaret was nodding thoughtfully. Several residents have already mentioned that their own families have called asking about visiting policies and event hosting possibilities. Your celebration has sparked wonderful interest in intergenerational activities. As the evening wound down and guests began saying their farewells, I reflected on how many unexpected layers our wedding day had revealed. What began as a simple ceremony to include Grandma Rose had uncovered family secrets, created new friendships, and apparently inspired other families to consider meaningful alternatives to traditional celebration venues. But the sealed envelopes in Patricia's hands promised even more revelations that would have to wait until we could read them in private. The morning would bring new understanding about my father's values and possibly new insights into what family really meant. For now, surrounded by the warmth and laughter of people who'd chosen to celebrate love over appearances, I felt grateful beyond words for every decision that had led us to this perfect, unexpected day. Sunday morning dawned with the peaceful quiet that follows perfect celebrations, and I woke up in our apartment as Mrs. Morgan Mitchell for the first time. David was already awake beside me, scrolling through photos on his phone that his family had taken during yesterday's ceremony. "Look at this one," he said, showing me a picture of Grandma Rose's speech moment where every face in the audience showed complete attention and emotion. I don't think there was a dry eye in the entire garden. "It was perfect," I agreed, curling up against his shoulder to admire more photos, even with all the family drama beforehand. "Especially because of the family drama," David corrected. "It made the real celebration even more meaningful." We were planning a lazy morning before heading to Sunset Manor to check on Grandma Rose and thank the residents for their incredible hospitality when urgent knocking at our front door shattered our peaceful newlywed bubble. "Morgan, open up! It's an emergency!" Jessica's voice carried through the door with panic I'd never heard before. David and I exchanged confused glances as I threw on a robe and hurried to the door. When I opened it, I found both Patricia and Jessica standing in our hallway still wearing yesterday's wedding outfits, but looking disheveled and frantic. "What's wrong?" I asked immediately, stepping aside to let them in. "Your wedding video," Patricia said without preamble. "It's everywhere." "What do you mean everywhere?" Jessica thrust her phone toward me with shaking hands. "Look at the nursing home's social media page." On the screen was a professionally edited video compilation of our wedding ceremony, featuring Harold's music, Grandma Rose's speech, and candid moments of residents celebrating with our guests. The caption read, "When love brings generations together, Morgan and David chose to celebrate their wedding at Sunset Manor, so her beloved grandmother could attend." What started as a simple ceremony became a celebration that reminded everyone what family really means. "This is beautiful," I said, confused about their panic. "What's the emergency?" "Look at the view count," Patricia said grimly. The numbers on the screen made my eyes widen in disbelief. Posted less than 12 hours ago, the video already had over 200,000 views, 15,000 shares, and thousands of comments. "How did this happen? We didn't authorize any official filming." Jessica sank onto our couch with her head in her hands. "Mrs. Henderson asked permission to document the ceremony for the facility's records and family scrapbooks. I thought it was just for internal use. But someone edited this professionally and added music and graphics," David observed, taking Jessica's phone to examine the video more closely. The nursing home's marketing coordinator stayed late last night to create something special," Patricia explained. "She thought it would be nice publicity for the facility to show how they support family celebrations." I was still trying to understand why this beautiful video representation of our wedding was causing such distress. I think it's lovely. It captures exactly how wonderful yesterday was. "Morgan, you don't understand," Jessica said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "Keep reading the comments." David scrolled through the comment section while I read over his shoulder. Most of the responses were overwhelmingly positive, with people sharing their own stories about elderly family members and praising our choice to prioritize Grandma Rose's presence over traditional venue expectations. But scattered throughout the supportive comments were screenshots of older posts and comments that made my blood run cold. Someone had found and shared Jessica's pre-wedding social media campaign against our venue choice. Her posts about poverty weddings and inappropriate venues were displayed alongside her complaints about disruption to nursing home residents, creating a clear timeline of her attempts to sabotage our celebration. Oh no, I breathed reading comment after comment, calling out Jessica's hypocrisy and cruelty. It gets worse, Patricia said, sitting heavily in David's armchair. Someone found the fake reviews Jessica posted about Sunset Manor and shared screenshots of those too. David continued scrolling, finding more evidence of Jessica's coordinated complaint campaign, including her requests for friends to call the corporate office with false concerns about the facility's standards. The internet detectives have been busy, he said grimly. They've connected your fake complaints to the positive video and are not happy about the contradiction. People are calling me a narcissist who tried to ruin my own sister's wedding for social media attention, Jessica said, tears flowing freely now. My work email is flooded with messages from people saying I'm a terrible person, and my real estate business social media is getting bombarded with comments about family values and supporting elderly community members, Patricia added. Potential clients are questioning whether they want to work with someone who would discourage nursing home celebrations. I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sympathy as I realized my family was facing the consequences of their own actions. The viral video had inadvertently exposed their attempts to sabotage our wedding, creating exactly the kind of public scrutiny they'd been so worried about. What do you want us to do? I asked, genuinely uncertain about how to respond. Make it stop, Jessica pleaded. Post something asking people to leave us alone. Tell them we've learned our lesson and support your marriage now. Jessica, I can't control what strangers on the internet decide to comment about. But you could ask people to be understanding about family members who made mistakes, Patricia suggested. Show them that we reconciled and that forgiveness is important. David was still reading comments on his phone, and his expression suggested he'd found something particularly significant. You should see this thread, he said, turning the screen toward us. A woman had posted a long comment about her own mother's experience with family members who refused to visit her in assisted living, followed by dozens of replies from people sharing similar stories about relatives who treated nursing home residents like embarrassments to be hidden. Your wedding video has started a conversation about how society treats elderly people, David explained. People are sharing their own experiences and talking about changing attitudes towards senior care. So this has become bigger than just our family drama, I realized. Much bigger, Patricia confirmed. Local news stations are asking for interviews about the viral wedding story. The nursing home is getting calls from families interested in having their own celebrations there. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang with Mrs. Henderson's number on the display. Morgan, I hope I'm not calling too early, Mrs. Henderson said when I answered, but I wanted to let you know that our phone has been ringing nonstop since the wedding video was shared online. Mrs. Henderson, I'm so sorry if this is causing problems for the facility. Problems. Oh, no, dear, this is wonderful. We've received more positive attention in 12 hours than in the past 5 years combined. Families are calling about visiting their elderly relatives. People are inquiring about volunteer opportunities. And 3 other couples have asked about hosting their own celebrations here. That's incredible. Your wedding has shown people a different way to think about nursing home communities. We're not just medical facilities where people wait to die. We're vibrant communities where life continues to be celebrated. After hanging up, I turned to my family with a clearer understanding of what had happened overnight. The video isn't the problem, I told them. Your pre-wedding behavior is the problem, and the video just made it visible to more people. But now everyone knows what we said and did, Jessica protested. Yes, and that's the natural consequence of posting cruel things about family members on social media. Patricia stood up and began pacing around our small living room. Morgan, we need your help to manage this situation. People will listen to you as the bride who forgave her family's mistakes. I did forgive your mistakes, but I'm not going to help you avoid accountability for them. What's that supposed to mean? David set down Jessica's phone and looked at both women seriously. It means that Morgan shouldn't have to clean up the mess you created by trying to sabotage her wedding. We weren't trying to sabotage anything, Jessica said defensively. Jessica, you filed false complaints trying to get the venue to cancel our ceremony, I pointed out. How is that not sabotage? The room fell silent as the reality of their actions settled between us. For months, I'd been focused on planning our wedding and managing their disapproval, but seeing their behavior exposed online made me realize how deliberate and hurtful their campaign had been. What if we made a public apology, Patricia suggested, explained that we were wrong and learned from watching your beautiful celebration? That's between you and your social media followers, I replied, but I'm not going to provide cover for behavior that was designed to hurt people I care about. Jessica's phone buzzed with another notification, and when she looked at it, her face went white. Oh no, she whispered. Channel 7 just posted about wanting to interview the family members who opposed the nursing home wedding for a follow-up story. The television news interest represented a new level of public attention that none of us had anticipated. Our private family conflict had somehow become a viral story about family values, elder care, and the meaning of celebration. But as I looked at Patricia and Jessica's genuine distress, I felt the first stirring of sympathy for their situation. They'd made poor choices based on superficial priorities, but they didn't deserve to become internet villains or television news targets. The question was whether their panic about public consequences would lead to genuine reflection about their behavior or just more sophisticated strategies for managing their reputations. By noon on Sunday, the viral wedding video had reached over 500,000 views, and the comments section had become a battleground between people celebrating our choice and others dissecting every detail of my family's pre-wedding behavior. David and I had turned off our phones after the 5th call from reporters requesting interviews about our heartwarming nursing home wedding story. Patricia and Jessica remained in our living room, frantically trying to manage the social media crisis that was engulfing both of their professional reputations. Jessica's marketing firm had already received 3 calls from clients questioning her character based on the exposed screenshots, and Patricia's real estate brokerage was fielding complaints about her anti-elderly bias. Look at this, Jessica said, showing us her laptop screen where someone had created a detailed timeline of her anti-wedding campaign, complete with archived social media posts, fake review screenshots, and evidence of her coordinated complaint strategy. Someone has way too much time on their hands, David observed. Someone has too much documentation of your actual behavior. I corrected, reading through the meticulously researched expose that laid out Jessica's sabotage efforts with prosecutorial thoroughness. The viral investigation had uncovered details even I hadn't known about, including Jessica's attempts to convince David's family that the nursing home venue was inappropriate, her efforts to research complaint procedures for multiple regulatory agencies, and her coordination with friends to create fake concerns about resident safety. This makes me look like a monster, Jessica said, staring at the screen in horror. It makes you look exactly like what you were doing, I replied honestly. Patricia had been mostly quiet while Jessica dealt with her social media exposure, but her own phone kept buzzing with notifications that were clearly causing increasing stress. The real estate board wants to schedule a meeting about complaints against my business practices, Patricia finally announced. Apparently, someone reported that I discouraged family celebrations at senior care facilities. Did you discourage family celebrations at senior care facilities? David asked. I discouraged my daughter from making what I thought was a poor venue choice. By lying to family members about wedding postponements and threatening to boycott the ceremony, Patricia's silence confirmed that the viral exposure had revealed behavior she couldn't reasonably defend. But the most damaging revelation came when Jessica discovered that someone had found and shared the audio recording of her phone call to Sunset Manor's corporate office, filing false complaints about our wedding disrupting resident care. "How do they have a recording of that call?" Jessica asked in panic. "Corporate customer service lines record all calls for quality assurance," David explained. "Someone probably requested the recordings through a Freedom of Information law or public records request." In the recording, Jessica's voice was crystal clear as she claimed that our wedding preparations were disrupting medical care, violating noise ordinances, and creating safety hazards for elderly residents. Her careful use of official-sounding language made the false complaints sound particularly calculated and malicious. "Jessica, you sound like you're reading from a script," I said after listening to the recording. "I researched the most effective language for filing complaints," she admitted miserably. "You researched how to most effectively lie about a nursing home to sabotage your sister's wedding." The blunt reality of her actions hung in the air like toxic smoke. For weeks, I'd been focused on defending our choices and managing family conflict, but hearing Jessica's recorded voice systematically attacking the facility that had shown us such kindness made me angrier than I'd ever been with my sister. "I was trying to protect you from making a mistake," Jessica said weakly. "You were trying to protect your own social image by preventing your sister from choosing love over appearances." Meanwhile, the positive response to our wedding video had generated its own momentum that was equally overwhelming. Mrs. Henderson called to report that Sunset Manor had received over 300 inquiries about visiting policies, volunteer opportunities, and event hosting possibilities. 3 local television stations want to feature our facility on community interest programs, Mrs. Henderson told me during our phone conversation. "And the State Nursing Home Association wants to use your wedding video in their campaign about changing perceptions of senior care." "That's wonderful, but are you prepared for all this attention?" "Morgan, this is the best thing that's happened to our community in years. Residents are excited about potential new visitors and volunteers, and families are calling to reconnect with relatives they haven't seen in months." The contrast between the positive impact our celebration was having on Sunset Manor and the negative consequences Jessica's sabotage was creating for her own life felt like poetic justice. But the situation escalated further when David discovered that someone had created a social media account dedicated to documenting wedding sabotage by toxic family members, using our story as a case study in manipulative behavior. "This is getting out of hand," Patricia said, reading through the detailed analysis of her real estate social media posts that had been indirectly criticizing our wedding choices for weeks. Mom, you literally posted about investing in your future and making decisions that reflect your values every day, leading up to our wedding," I pointed out. "Everyone could see those posts were directed at me." "But I never mentioned your wedding specifically." "You didn't have to. The passive-aggressive subtext was clear to anyone following your social media." David's phone rang with a call from an unknown number, which turned out to be a producer from a morning talk show requesting an interview about our inspiring intergenerational celebration. "We'd love to feature your story as an example of how young couples can honor elderly family members," the producer explained. "Could you and your wife come on the show this week?" "We're not interested in media appearances," David replied politely. "This was a private family celebration." But think about the positive message you could share about nursing home communities and elderly care. After David declined the interview request, we sat in contemplative silence while Patricia and Jessica continued monitoring their respective social media disasters. "I have an idea," I said finally, "but you're probably not going to like it." "What kind of idea?" Patricia asked suspiciously. "You both need to take responsibility for your behavior instead of trying to manage the public relations fallout." "Meaning what exactly?" meaning you should publicly apologize to Sunset Manor, to the residents who were excited about our wedding, and to the families who were inspired by our video. Jessica looked horrified. That would just draw more attention to what we did wrong. Jessica, you filed false complaints against a nursing home and tried to sabotage your sister's wedding. More attention to what you did wrong might be exactly what you deserve. But what about our careers, our reputations? What about the reputation of Sunset Manor when you posted fake reviews? What about the residents' feelings when you claimed they were being disrupted by celebration preparations? Patricia and Jessica exchanged glances that suggested they were finally beginning to understand the broader impact of their actions beyond their own social embarrassment. If we apologized publicly, Patricia asked carefully, would you support us in that apology? I would support genuine accountability and efforts to make amends, I replied, but I won't help you craft an apology designed to minimize your responsibility or restore your reputations. The viral wedding video had accomplished something weeks of family arguments couldn't achieve. It had forced Patricia and Jessica to confront the real-world consequences of prioritizing appearances over relationships. But whether they would choose genuine reflection and growth or simply more sophisticated damage control strategies remained to be seen. Monday morning brought an unexpected phone call that would change everything we thought we knew about our family's financial situation. Grandma Rose's lawyer, Mr. Phillips, requested an emergency meeting at his office to discuss time-sensitive estate matters that require immediate family attention. Patricia, Jessica, and I gathered in his downtown law office at 10 o'clock, with David accompanying me for moral support. Mr. Phillips was a distinguished man in his 70s who had been handling Grandma Rose's legal affairs for over 20 years. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. He began settling behind his mahogany desk with several thick folders. Mrs. Rose asked me to convene this meeting following your wedding celebration, Morgan. She has some important decisions to share with the family. Patricia leaned forward with the attentive expression she used during real estate negotiations. Is everything all right with Mother's health? Her health remains stable given her diagnosis, but she's decided to accelerate some estate planning decisions based on recent family dynamics. Mr. Phillips opened the largest folder and produced a document that was clearly a last will and testament, along with several property deeds and financial statements. Mrs. Rose owns significantly more assets than some family members realize, he continued. The house on Maple Street, where you girls grew up visiting her, was never sold. She's been renting it to tenants for the past 5 years, generating substantial monthly income. Jessica's eyes widened with surprise. Grandma Rose still owns that house, but Mom said she sold it when she moved to the nursing home. I allowed your mother to believe the house was sold because Mrs. Rose preferred privacy about her financial affairs, Mr. Phillips explained diplomatically. Patricia was staring at the property deeds spread across the desk. What's the current value of that house? The property has appreciated considerably. Current market value is approximately $450,000. The number hung in the air like a revelation that reframed everything we thought we knew about Grandma Rose's financial situation. Additionally, Mr. Phillips continued, Mrs. Rose has maintained investment accounts and savings that total approximately $600,000. Jessica's intake of breath was audible. Grandma Rose is wealthy. Mrs. Rose is financially comfortable, yes. She's lived modestly and invested wisely for decades. Patricia's real estate training kicked in immediately, so we're talking about over $1 million in total assets, approximately $1.2 million, including personal property and life insurance benefits. David squeezed my hand under the table as we processed this unexpected information about my grandmother's hidden financial resources. Now, Mr. Phillips said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, Mrs. Rose has made some decisions about how these assets will be distributed, and she wanted me to explain her reasoning to the family. He produced a revised will document that was clearly very recent, dated just 3 days ago. Based on observations of family behavior surrounding Morgan's wedding, Mrs. Rose has decided to leave the majority of her estate to Morgan, with specific provisions about how the assets should be used. Patricia's face went completely white. What do you mean, the majority? The house on Maple Street, the investment accounts, and 75% of all other assets will go to Morgan, with the stipulation that she use a portion of the inheritance to support nursing home community programs and elderly advocacy initiatives. Jessica was doing rapid mental calculations. What about the rest of us? Mrs. Newman and Jessica will receive family heirloom sentimental items and 25% of the remaining assets to be split between them. The financial implications were staggering. Instead of inheriting roughly $300,000 each, as Patricia had probably expected, she and Jessica would receive maybe $75,000 combined, while I would inherit over $1 million. Mother can't be serious about this, Patricia said, her voice tight with controlled panic. Mrs. Rose was very specific about her reasoning, Mr. Phillips replied calmly. She explained that Morgan demonstrated family values that align with her own priorities, while other family members prioritized social appearances over relationships. But this is incredibly unfair, Jessica protested. One wedding venue choice shouldn't determine inheritance distributions. According to Mrs. Rose, the wedding venue was simply the most recent example of a pattern of values differences that have been apparent for years. Mr. Phillips pulled out a handwritten letter from Grandma Rose that explained her decision in her own words. Then she specifically mentioned Morgan's choice to include her in the wedding celebration, contrasted with other family members' attempts to discourage that inclusion for social reasons. Patricia was now gripping the arms of her chair with white knuckles. Mr. Phillips, surely there are legal challenges available if family members believe an elderly person was influenced by recent events. Mrs. Rose underwent comprehensive mental competency evaluation last week to ensure her decisions couldn't be contested on those grounds, he replied smoothly. She's legally sound and fully capable of making these determinations. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of an antique clock on Mr. Phillips's bookshelf. The viral wedding video had exposed my family's behavior to internet strangers, but Grandma Rose's will revision would have permanent financial consequences that would affect their lives for years. Is there any possibility of discussing these changes with Mother directly? Patricia asked carefully. Mrs. Rose anticipated that question. She's available to meet with family members individually if they wish to understand her reasoning more completely. When could we arrange those meetings? This afternoon, if you're available. She's eager to discuss her decisions openly, rather than leaving family members wondering about her motivations. As we prepared to leave the law office, I felt overwhelmed by the financial responsibility Grandma Rose had placed on my shoulders. $1 million was more money than I'd ever imagined inheriting, but it came with clear expectations about using the resources to support causes she cared about. Morgan, Patricia said as we stood in the parking lot outside Mr. Phillips's office, can we talk privately before we meet with Mother this afternoon? What do you want to discuss? I want to understand if there's anything Jessica and I can do to demonstrate that we've learned from our mistakes about your wedding. David stepped slightly closer to me, clearly suspicious of Patricia's motives. Are you asking Morgan to help you change Grandma Rose's mind about the will? I'm asking Morgan to consider whether family reconciliation might be possible if we prove we can change our attitudes and behavior. Jessica nodded eagerly. We could volunteer at Sunset Manor, make donations to elderly care programs, publicly support nursing home community initiatives. You could do those things because they're the right things to do, I replied, not because you want to change an inheritance distribution. But if we genuinely change our values and priorities, shouldn't that matter for family relationships? I looked at these two women who shared my DNA but had spent weeks trying to sabotage the most important day of my life and felt a complex mixture of love, disappointment, and cautious hope. If you genuinely change your values and priorities, that should matter for your own personal growth and future relationships, I said finally, but it shouldn't be motivated by financial expectations. The afternoon meetings with Grandma Rose would reveal whether Patricia and Jessica were capable of genuine reflection or were simply strategizing new approaches to getting what they wanted. But either way, my grandmother's will revision had created consequences that would force them to confront the true cost of prioritizing appearances over family bonds. That afternoon, I sat with Grandma Rose in her sunny room at Sunset Manor, while Patricia and Jessica waited their turns for individual conversations about the inheritance decision. Despite her recent health scare, my grandmother looked remarkably alert and determined as she explained her reasoning for the will changes. "Sweetheart, that inheritance isn't a reward for choosing the right wedding venue," she said, holding my hands in her warm, soft ones. "It's recognition that you understand something about love and family that your mother and sister have forgotten." "Grandma Rose, it feels like such a huge responsibility." "It is a huge responsibility, but you've already proven you're capable of making decisions based on love rather than social pressure." Through the window, we could see the garden courtyard where we'd been married just 2 days ago, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since then. Harold was playing piano for a small audience of residents, and Eleanor was organizing an afternoon craft session that included several new volunteers who'd been inspired by our viral wedding video. The nursing home has received over 200 volunteer applications since our wedding video went online, I told her. That doesn't surprise me. People want to be part of communities that celebrate life instead of just managing decline. But Mom and Jessica are really struggling with the social media backlash from their behavior being exposed. Grandma Rose's expression grew sympathetic but firm. "Natural consequences for poor choices aren't punishment, Morgan. They're learning opportunities." Jessica's marketing firm is considering terminating her contract because clients are questioning her character. Then perhaps Jessica needs to think about what kind of character she wants to demonstrate going forward. A soft knock interrupted our conversation, and Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway with a smile that suggested good news. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to share some exciting developments with both of you." "Please come in," Grandma Rose said, gesturing toward the comfortable chair by her window. "We've just received confirmation that 3 other families want to hold wedding celebrations here this fall, and 5 local high schools are organizing intergenerational volunteer programs based on the interest your wedding generated." That's wonderful," I said, feeling proud that our celebration had inspired positive community engagement. "There's more. The State Nursing Home Association wants to feature our facility in their annual conference presentation about innovative community programming." Grandma Rose beamed with satisfaction. "This place has always been special, but now other people are recognizing what we residents have known all along." After Mrs. Henderson left, my grandmother returned to our conversation about family dynamics and inheritance decisions. "Morgan, I want you to understand that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from the consequences of their actions. I know, but it's hard to watch Mom and Jessica struggle with public criticism." "They're not struggling with public criticism, sweetheart. They're struggling with public exposure of behavior they chose to engage in." "What's the difference?" "Criticism suggests unfair judgment. Exposure suggests accurate reporting of actual actions." Her clear-eyed assessment of the situation helped me process my own conflicted feelings about my family's social media crisis. "Your mother will be here in a few minutes for her conversation with me," Grandma Rose continued. "I suspect she'll try to negotiate some kind of arrangement about the inheritance." "Well, what will you tell her?" "I'll tell her that family relationships aren't business transactions where behavior changes can be exchanged for financial benefits. Right on schedule, Patricia appeared in the doorway, wearing her most professional outfit and carrying a folder that suggested she'd prepared for this conversation like a business presentation. "Mother, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she said, settling into the visitor chair with careful posture. "Of course, dear. We should talk openly about my decisions and your concerns." I started to leave to give them privacy, but Grandma Rose caught my hand. "Stay, Morgan. Family conversations shouldn't require secrecy." Patricia glanced at me nervously before beginning what was clearly a prepared speech. "Mother, I want to acknowledge that I made poor choices about Morgan's wedding. I allowed social concerns to override family support, and I'm genuinely sorry about that." "I appreciate your apology, Patricia. I also want you to know that Jessica and I have been discussing ways to demonstrate genuine attitude changes about elderly care and community involvement." Grandma Rose nodded thoughtfully. "What kinds of changes are you considering?" Patricia opened her folder and produced a typed document that made my stomach sink with its obvious calculation. "We've researched volunteer opportunities at 3 different nursing homes, identified charitable organizations focused on elder advocacy, and planned social media campaigns to promote positive aging initiatives." "That sounds very organized," Grandma Rose replied diplomatically. "We're hoping these concrete actions might demonstrate that we've learned from our mistakes and are committed to better family values going forward." The unspoken implication hung in the air like a business proposition: behavioral changes in exchange for inheritance reconsideration. "Patricia," Grandma Rose said gently, "are you planning these activities because you believe they're important, or because you hope they'll influence my estate decisions?" Patricia's prepared composure cracked slightly. "Both, honestly. I want to be a better person, but I also think it's unfair that one disagreement about a wedding venue should determine inheritance distributions." "Sweetheart, your objections to Morgan's wedding weren't about venue preferences. They were about prioritizing social appearances over family relationships." "But people make mistakes. Surely family members deserve opportunities to prove they can change." Grandma Rose leaned forward with the patient expression she'd used when teaching me difficult life lessons as a child. "Patricia, what you're describing isn't change, it's performance. You're planning charitable activities as a strategy to influence my will, not because you've developed genuine concern for elderly community members." Patricia's face flushed with embarrassment at having her motivations exposed so clearly. "Besides," Grandma Rose continued, "Morgan didn't inherit my estate because she chose the right wedding venue. She inherited it because she consistently demonstrates the values I want to perpetuate." "What values specifically?" "Choosing love over convenience, including people instead of hiding them, prioritizing relationships over appearances, values that can't be demonstrated through strategic volunteer activities." Patricia closed her folder with obvious frustration. "So there's nothing Jessica and I can do to be treated equally in your inheritance decisions?" "You can live according to your own values without expecting financial rewards for behavioral changes," Grandma Rose replied. "That's what genuine growth looks like." After Patricia left for Jessica's turn at the conversation, I sat with my grandmother in contemplative silence. "Do you think they'll ever genuinely understand what family means?" I asked. "I think they'll understand what they choose to understand," she replied wisely. "But that's not your responsibility, sweetheart." "Then what is my responsibility?" "Using your inheritance to build the kind of community you want to live in, and teaching any children you might have that love matters more than money." Jessica's conversation with Grandma Rose followed a similar pattern, though, with more tears and emotional appeals about sisterly forgiveness and second chances. But the outcome was the same. Genuine relationship repair couldn't be negotiated through charitable activities designed to influence inheritance decisions. As evening approached and the individual family meetings concluded, I felt a strange sense of peace about the choices ahead. My viral wedding had exposed family dynamics that needed addressing, and Grandma Rose's will revision had created consequences that couldn't be avoided through social media management strategies. The only question remaining was whether Patricia and Jessica would choose authentic self reflection or continue seeking external validation through performance and manipulation. But for the first time in my adult life, I realized that question wasn't mine to answer. 6 months later, I stood in the same garden courtyard at Sunset Manor, where David and I had exchanged vows, but now I was addressing a conference of nursing home administrators from across 3 states. Our viral wedding video had continued generating interest in intergenerational programming, and I'd been invited to speak about community engagement and family inclusion in senior care facilities. When my husband and I chose to hold our wedding here, I told the audience of healthcare professionals we weren't trying to make a statement about senior care or start a social movement. We simply wanted my grandmother to be part of our celebration. Behind me, PowerPoint slides showed photos from our wedding day, highlighting the joy on residents' faces and the genuine connections that had formed between our guests and the nursing home community. But what we learned is that inclusion creates its own momentum. When we choose love over convenience, community over appearances, we create ripple effects that extend far beyond our original intentions. Grandma Rose sat in the front row looking elegant in her favorite blue dress and showing remarkable vitality despite her ongoing cancer treatment. Her health had stabilized significantly over the past months, and her doctors attributed some of her improvement to her renewed sense of purpose and community engagement. Mrs. Rose has become our unofficial ambassador for intergenerational programming, Mrs. Henderson had told me before the presentation. She speaks with every family considering our facility and shares her perspective about what it means to be truly included in family celebrations. After my presentation, I joined Grandma Rose for lunch in the dining room, where several residents who'd attended our wedding had become regular companions. Harold still played piano daily, but now his audience included volunteer music therapy students from the local college. Eleanor continued coordinating special events, but her calendar was filled with family celebrations that had been inspired by our example. "How are things going with your new jobs?" Grandma Rose asked as we enjoyed the improved menu that had been expanded based on resident feedback and increased community support. "I love working for the Elder Advocacy Foundation," I replied honestly. "Using part of the inheritance to fund community programs has been more rewarding than I ever imagined. 6 months ago, I'd used a portion of my inheritance to establish a grant program for nursing homes implementing intergenerational activities. The foundation had already funded music therapy programs, volunteer coordination initiatives, and family celebration support services at facilities across the state." "And how are David's business prospects developing?" "The positive publicity from our wedding has brought in more clients than he can handle. Apparently, people want to work with someone who makes family-centered decisions." Through the dining room windows, I could see Patricia's car pulling into the parking lot for her weekly visit with Grandma Rose. Their relationship had slowly improved over the months, though it remained complicated by the inheritance situation, and Patricia struggled to move beyond her social embarrassment. "Mom's been coming every week since the will reading," I observed. She's trying," Grandma Rose said diplomatically, "though I'm not always certain whether she's visiting, because she enjoys our conversations or because she feels obligated to demonstrate family devotion." "Does it matter as long as she's here?" "It matters for her own peace of mind. Obligation visits feel different than joy visits, both for the visitor and the person being visited." Patricia appeared in the dining room doorway, carrying flowers and wearing the carefully composed expression she used when she was managing uncomfortable situations. Her real estate business had recovered from the social media crisis, partly because she'd eventually issued a genuine public apology about her behavior, and partly because the market had been strong enough to overcome temporary reputation damage. Hello, Mother. Hello, Morgan, she said, settling into the chair beside Grandma Rose with obvious effort to appear relaxed. Patricia, how was your week? Grandma Rose asked warmly. Busy with several new listings, but good. I wanted to update you on the volunteer work I've been doing with the Senior Transportation Program. For the past 3 months, Patricia had been driving elderly residents to medical appointments and grocery shopping initially as part of her attempt to demonstrate changed values, but increasingly because she seemed to genuinely enjoy the conversations with her passengers. Mrs. Garcia told me you helped her navigate her insurance benefits confusion, Grandma Rose said approvingly. It reminded me of what Morgan used to tell me about Dad's volunteer work here. I understand now why he found it meaningful to help people with practical problems they couldn't solve alone. The mention of my father brought a moment of comfortable silence as we all remembered the letter he'd left for us, which we'd finally read together on Christmas Day. His words about family values, community service, and the importance of including elderly relatives in family life had provided perspective that helped heal some of our relationship wounds. And speaking of family, Patricia said, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, Jessica asked me to tell you that her new job is working out well. Jessica had ultimately been terminated from her marketing firm due to client complaints about her character, but she'd found a position with a nonprofit organization focused on combating elder abuse and isolation. The irony wasn't lost on any of us that her experience being publicly called out for anti-elderly bias had led her toward advocacy work. She's been asking if she could visit you sometime, Patricia continued looking at Grandma Rose. She says she wants to apologize in person for her behavior about the wedding. She's welcome anytime, Grandma Rose replied, though I hope she understands that apologies are for her own peace of mind, not for changing inheritance decisions. I think she does understand that now. David arrived as we were finishing lunch, coming straight from a client meeting and looking pleased about whatever business he'd been conducting. How did the presentation go? He asked, kissing my cheek and settling into the chair beside me. Very well. 3 facilities want to pilot intergenerational wedding celebration programs based on our model. That's fantastic. And how's our favorite grandmother doing today? Grandma Rose beamed at David's attention. I'm doing wonderfully, especially since the doctor says my cancer markers have remained stable for 4 consecutive months. The medical stability felt miraculous, given her original prognosis of weeks rather than months. Her oncologist attributed the improvement to multiple factors, including better nutrition, increased social engagement, and what he termed renewed life purpose. I have something to share with all of you, Grandma Rose announced, reaching into her purse for an envelope that immediately reminded me of the mysterious letters from our wedding day. What is it? I asked. The Nursing Home Association has asked me to speak at their national conference about family inclusion and resident advocacy. Patricia's eyes widened with surprise. You're going to speak at a national conference in Las Vegas next month? Mrs. Henderson is arranging for medical support during travel, and they're providing first-class accommodations. The idea of my 82-year-old grandmother addressing healthcare professionals from across the country felt both exciting and surreal. They want me to share my perspective about what it means to be treated as a valued family member rather than a burden to be managed, she continued. Apparently, our wedding video and your advocacy work have sparked national conversations about changing attitudes towards senior care. David shook his head in amazement. From nursing home wedding to national healthcare conference speaker, that's quite a journey. It's been quite a year, I agreed, thinking about everything that had changed since we'd first decided to move our wedding date and venue. As we prepared to leave that afternoon, Grandma Rose pulled me aside for a private moment in her room. Morgan, I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become and the choices you continue making. Thank you, Grandma Rose, for everything. There's something else. I've been meeting with Mr. Phillips about establishing a foundation that will continue funding intergenerational programs after I'm gone. Grandma, hush, sweetheart. I'm not planning to go anywhere anytime soon, but when I do, I want the work we've started together to continue growing. She handed me a folder containing preliminary foundation documents that would endow ongoing grants for nursing home community programming, family inclusion initiatives, and elder advocacy organizations. The foundation will be funded by my remaining assets and managed by people who understand that community care matters more than individual wealth. This is incredible. It's what your father would have wanted. He believed that how we treat our elderly community members reflects our true values as a society. As David and I drove home that evening, I reflected on how completely our lives had changed since our wedding day. What began as a simple desire to include Grandma Rose in our celebration had evolved into a career in elder advocacy, a viral movement promoting intergenerational connection and family relationships that were slowly healing from years of misplaced priorities. Do you ever regret choosing the nursing home for our wedding? David asked as we pulled into our driveway. Never, I replied without hesitation. Best decision we ever made. Even with all the family drama and social media chaos, especially because of the family drama and social media chaos, it forced everyone to confront what they really valued. And what do you value? I looked at this man who'd supported every difficult decision I'd made, who'd stood beside me through family conflicts and viral internet fame, who'd helped me build a life focused on love rather than appearances. I value love that shows up when it matters. I value family that celebrates joy instead of managing embarrassment. I value community that includes everyone instead of hiding people away. Sounds like we chose the right life. Sounds like we chose the right love. 6 months later, our nursing home wedding had inspired dozens of similar celebrations, generated funding for intergenerational programs across multiple states, and taught our entire family that authentic relationships matter more than social expectations. Grandma Rose's health had stabilized. Patricia was slowly developing genuine community connections. Jessica was building a career around elder advocacy, and David and I were creating the kind of marriage that prioritized love over convenience. Most importantly, we learned that family isn't just about DNA, it's about who shows up to celebrate your joy, who supports your difficult decisions, and who chooses love over appearances when those choices matter most. Our viral wedding had become a symbol of intergenerational connection and authentic family values, but for us, it would always be remembered as the day we chose community over convention and discovered that love creates its own momentum when we're brave enough to follow it. The lesson that emerged from our complicated family journey was simple but profound. When we choose inclusion over exclusion, love over appearances, and community over convenience, we create ripple effects that extend far beyond our original intentions. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations happen in unexpected places, surrounded by people who understand that joy shared is joy multiplied. What matters most isn't where you celebrate love, it's who chooses to celebrate with you, and whether you have the courage to prioritize authentic relationships over social expectations. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and following your heart? How do you think we can better support elderly family members and create more inclusive communities? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories about family love and finding courage to make difficult choices, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that authentic relationships matter more than appearances. Thank you for joining me on this journey of love, family complications, and discovering what truly matters when we're brave enough to follow our hearts. Remember that every choice we make about inclusion versus exclusion, love versus appearances, creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Until next time, choose love, choose community, and never be afraid to celebrate joy in unexpected places.